Welcome to another edition of In Focus. My guest today in studio is Wenatchee Mayor Frank Kuntz. Welcome to the program.
Steve, thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, we're closing out 2019 and getting ready for the new decade. Wenatchee, of course, is in the thick of a lot of things right now. And you've got a lot of unfinished business from 2019, and things are looking pretty good financially speaking, too, for the city of Wenatchee. Let's start in that department right now, and you passed a budget for next year?
Yeah, we passed a budget. We're just south of $100 million for all funds, including all the utilities that we operate. You know, we own the water system, sewer, garbage and stormwater, and we have some construction projects planned in those areas. Our general fund budget's about $26 million, which is sort of where you pay for public safety and building and planning and those sorts of things. So, you know, obviously we're in a lot different position than we were when I became mayor 8 years ago in terms of where our financial resources are. So that's obviously good, but we're also a growing city and we're trying to sort of put things back in place. You know, we took some major budget cuts back in the recession. And as we sort of put things back together, we're trying to do it very strategically as to, you know, what's the new city look like? Where's growth going to happen? And so we're being very strategic about that. We did pass a budget. We were attempted to get a couple more police officers funded in that and didn't get it done. And that's okay. Council, you know, they make those sort of policy decisions, and it's my job to execute them. And so we'll do the best we can. But we're in a way better financial spot than we were, say, 8 years ago.
Your lifeblood, of course, is sales tax money, and so certainly developing that as a resource is always sound business practice. But looking at your budget, it looks like the spending is outsourcing the revenue.
Listen, it's always going to do that, depending on what kind of positions you really, again, as you sort of put things back together again. You know, we're working hard to try to be a complete city. And so, you know, complete city means you fund things like museums, roads, sidewalk improvements, even public art to some degree. We have a little art fund that we have. So, you know, complete cities look at all of that, as well as public safety, jail, rivercom. You know, there's lots that goes into sort of running a city. And, you know, we try to make our best judgment calls as to how those sorts of things work. For instance, with our jail this year, we got a 25% increase from Chelan County. Well, that's a big increase, right? And that wasn't one that's not one that the city, we sort of knew it was coming, but we have to absorb that. We don't have other places to go.
So now, is this tied to the capital improvements they made at the jail?
Some of their capital improvements, and I think some other sort of issues there. So again, they just sort of said you have a 25% increase. If everybody gave us a 25% increase, we would have real problems. So again, as you sort of look through how these things sort of work, we're able to absorb most of that and just through normal operations. But you know, that always, you know, that's a couple $100,000 a year, and so that's the difference between being able to hire another police officer if you wanted to on the gang front or on the homeless and some of the other things that you want to do. So it's always a juggling act, Steve. It's never quite perfect, but we do the best we can. We've got some great committees. You know, we have a finance committee at the city that helps me put the budget together, so the council's involved in all of that. And again, it's always a bit of a juggling act, and we always, you know, most local governments would like to do more things, and revenue seems to get in the way.
The city is certainly growing. We're seeing a lot of new residential development as well, which bodes well, I guess, for the city finances, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think if you look at what's going on,
versus services that you have to pay for.
Yes. So when you look at our sales tax, and I've said this for quite a while, you know, we need to have new houses built inside the city limits of the city of Wenatchee. The construction on those is great. Lowe's and Home Depot, Save Mart, other sorts of businesses that help provide into the new housing or remodeling are very important to our budget. And so it's really important that we continue to have that. So you see the city getting involved a little bit with some of our savings in our general fund on things like perhaps a new development up above the cemetery, and in where Bart Clinton's got some property, you know, maybe 500 units in there. Some of the Philippi stuff, other little parcels. You know, we look at sort of west of Western Avenue, and we see somewhere between 1,000 to 1,200 new housing units. maybe over the next 10 to 15 years. And then I ask you this question, where do we grow from there? And the answer is we're sort of running out of space. And so the next mayor at some point in time is really going to have an issue as to how do you continue to pay for the services you want when you're really going to have very little new housing construction going on. That's not next year, but that's 10 or 12 years down the road. You could certainly see that starting to happen.
There's also that dynamic that, that dealing with affordable housing and in the Wenatchee area, and we continue to see that situation where people are working here, but they can't afford to live here.
Yep, very difficult.
What's the answer? I mean, is it more living units? Is it market-driven, or is it something that you can...
I would say two things. If I could fix that, I'd snap my finger and fix it. If I could fix the homeless problem, I'd snap it and snap my fingers and we'd fix that as well. Both of those are multifaceted sort of issues. It's more expensive to build here. Just contractors and electrical contractors and plumbers and all of that stuff. The cost to go buy lumber in our town is 10% higher than the Tri-Cities and Spokane and other places. So it's just is more expensive to build here. What the city can do is we can provide property tax exemptions for those that build a fourplex or larger, and we're doing that. So you're starting to see a number of multifamily units get built. You're starting to see the vacancy rate sort of trickle up a little bit. We're up around almost 2% now. We were down to about a half of 1% at one point. If you drive around town, you'll see a couple of for rent signs that you didn't used to see before. So I think we're making a little bit of progress in terms of being able to provide units. If you want to go out and buy a house right now, it's extremely expensive and it's really difficult. Not only in Wenatchee, but lots of other places up and down the west coast of the United States. This isn't just a Wenatchee issue. Listen, we can't do like Richland and Kennewick and Pasco and just knock out another wheat field and go, right? And they have a lot of flat land that's easy to develop. All of the stuff the city's got left is very difficult to develop, right? All of the stuff that you have to cross the canal and build a bridge to get, and hillsides, and urban interface, and interface with wildlife, and all of this stuff makes all of that development extremely expensive. Yeah. And so I don't know how you fix it other than try to do the things that we're at least trying to do and try to encourage development.
Along that whole growth-related issue is the situation and the potential for the north end of town. And of course, a part of that is the Confluence Parkway project and development of some of the old DOT property and the PUD properties and such. How do you see that going forward in 2020?
So I think you'll see a little bit more of what you saw. If you went out there today, you'll notice that the old Northwest Wholesale office building is down. The concrete building directly behind Smitty's is down.
New fire station going in at the old Prospect of Pines.
That's starting to happen. So in and around North Wenatchee Avenue out in the old WashDOT area, you'll see some more of that. There's one more building that needs to come down, the State Farm office. And then later this year, I'm told by my Public Works Director that the McKittrick Street interchange will begin construction later in 2020. So there will be a fully signalized intersection at McKittrick and North Wenatchee Avenue. It will then head east and sort of stop for a little bit until we get some money for Confluence Parkway to take it under the railroad tracks. But that is an area you'll see Hooked on Toys eventually building out there, probably not in 2020, but 2021. I think the folks from Smitty's are going to buy some of the property behind there for parking lots and other sorts of things, and you'll start to see that happen. And then maybe in the next year or two, you'll start seeing the WashDOT buildings come down. We did an RFP, tried to get people interested in keeping the buildings, and no one was interested. So at some point, some of those buildings will come down as well, and we have a lot of interest in what might go into that intersection as well. So pretty exciting times. It will take some time. That's another probably 4 or 5 year process to get it all sort of roads in, infrastructure put in, and land sold and new buildings built. But it'll look drastically different.
Going forward, I know there's a new dynamic that's a result of the 976 and your loss of state funding for certain transportation projects. Does that fit into the...
Yeah, I think here's what we did. We had interesting timing. So we sort of had this 2-year process where we were going to spend we'd been saving some of our $20 car tab money and some other transportation property tax money that we sort of put into our transportation fund. And you saw a pretty big little program last year where we did all that chip seal work on the major arterials. And then we had planned for 2020 to do up to about $4.5 million of actually redoing city streets. We have a number of city just residential streets that are in really poor shape. Well, part of that was to be paid for by $20 car tab. So that has gone away. So the city council has said, no, we're not going to do a $4.5 million project now. We're going to do a $3.5 million project. Still a project, and you'll see that this summer on a lot of residential streets. And that's all said and good. What we don't know is what the year after that looks like. So 2021, 2022, 2023, we really don't have any sort of money set aside to redo city streets other than the little thin patches we've done and stuff with our own city crews. So
A big question mark going forward then.
it's a big question mark, and I certainly am guessing that the legislature at some point will provide councilmatic authority, different funding mechanisms, or a vote of the people to help sort of replenish what that would look like. So we'll spend what we have in 2020, and then I think we're going to be in a really slowdown on our road projects for quite a while.
Okay. Another project that we're looking at here in the coming year would be, well, actually in a couple of years, would be the transfer of the lease for the old community center
Yes.
down here. And as I understand it, that you did put out a request for proposals, and that the new charter school came back as a possible winner there, the Pinnacles Prep.
Yes.
How is that going to affect, let's say, the Veterans Hall that's there as well?
So there's 2 or 3 tenants that are currently there, and I think some of the stuff with English and Spanish speaking, there's some
Literacy Council.
councils in there, and I know the veterans have their building that they get to use some of the time. And so what we've really, I think some of the smaller tenants are going to find spots, and then if we end up leasing the entire facility to Pinnacle Preps, which I'm sort of thinking that's going to happen maybe by the end of this year. I've been meeting with the veterans, and we sort of have a handshake agreement that the city will find them a place and will rent them a facility inside the city limits of the city of Wenatchee. In fact, we met with some real estate folks last week, got a couple of options for them. So we will find the veterans a home. I'll find it interesting that we'll be spending city general fund money to do that. The only money that comes in any place for veterans is through a real estate excise tax. So the county has all of the money set aside to help veterans, yet they've sort of said we're not interested in participating in finding them a place. So we will go find them a place with city general fund dollars. I'm confident. My hope is we have something by June, July, or August for them.
Okay, really good. One final item I think that is unfinished business going forward, and that is refilling that position that's been vacated by Allison Williams.
Yeah, so we, Allison is off to the city of Moses Lake. Her last day with us was last Monday. And so we wish her and her husband the best, and she'll do a great job for Moses Lake, so we're excited for them. Disappointed for us, but that happens in government. And so we will start a process, I think, sometime in January. We have a couple of ideas on some folks, and we may be doing a couple little internal things, and at some point, hopefully by mid-January, we'll either have someone in that spot, or we'll have a process in place to put that together. So
Now, prior to Allison's being hired by the city, I think we had Gary Tomzik, who was the city administrator at the time. We did have a city manager.
Yep.
Why don't we go forward in that direction?
So I think we might. To me, that's really sort of a city council call, and I will meet with the council members. As Allison has left, and quite frankly, she ran sort of as the city administrator, although, again, all the department heads reported to me, not her, which is what's different in Moses Lake than here. And so I think we've just started to have this discussion about, are we to the point where we would have a city administrator again and have all the department heads report to that person, and then the mayor would probably take a reduction in pay, yet be involved more in policy issues and more involved in Olympia and other sorts of places, and less sort of, not day-to-day hands-on, but I let the department heads sort of run, and we meet with each of them very regularly. But so I think there's a chance that we'll go that direction. I'm getting inaugurated here for my third 4-year term in about a half an hour, and I think over the next couple of years we'll talk about what that might look like. And then if the council wants to, it's already sort of in the city code, but if they say, yeah, Mayor, we want you to do that, then we'll stick it in a budget at some point and sort of look at that direction. So I think there's sort of I go back and forth. There's times when I go, this is probably the right thing to do. And there's times when I go, yeah, but I want the chief of police to report to me, or I want the public works director to report to me, or some of those sorts of things that I think people sort of expect. So I sort of go back and forth on it. I think we'll study it over the next couple of years. And I wouldn't be surprised, quite frankly, if we have a city administrator or that we don't, but we will study it.
Okay, very good. Again, we're talking with Wenatchee City Mayor Frank Kuntz on In Focus today. Anything you'd like to share with us in closing?
No, just wishing everybody a happy new year, be safe, and your city's working really hard. We've got great department heads, a great city council, and we're just trying to do what we think is in the best interest of the city, and we're going to keep plugging away at it.
Well, good luck and prosperous new year for the city of Wenatchee in 2020.
Great, thanks, Steve.
Thanks for joining me.
You bet.
I'm Steve Hare. Thanks for joining us on In Focus here on NCW Life.